So it's like this. It so happens that this week, I mean, it's a unique opportunity because I noticed that the Daf Yomi is holding in on a Daf Nun Gimel. I think maybe it was yesterday or something, and it so happens that Daf Nun Gimel in Psachim is related to this week's parsha, as we shall see. So I can't hold back from sharing the following, even though it's a bit more complicated than what we usually discuss. So the mice is like this. The Gemara says in Psachim Daf Nun Gimel, Amar Rabbi Yosi, Toidos or Tudus Ish Roimi. He was a Jew that lived in Rome. Hinig es b'nei Roimi lechol gedoyim mikulasim b'leilei Psachim. He created a minhag in Rome that Jews should eat on the night of Pesach a goat that's mekulos, as Rashi says, that it's roasted roishoy al kro'ov val kirboy, on its head, legs, and innards, like the Korban Pesach, in the same fashion as the Korban Pesach. So he made a minhag that by the Seder night, they ate gedoyim mikulosim. Sholchuloi, they sent him a message, the Rabbonim sent him a message, ilimolei toidus ato, if it wasn't that you were toidus, gozarnu alechonidu, we would excommunicate you. She'ato machil es Yisrael kochim bachutz, because you're feeding Yidden kochim in chutz la'aretz, in chutz of Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says, so Rashi says, I mean, the Gemara says, kochim solkadaitach, I mean, they weren't makdish it as a Korban Pesach. Elo'ema koroiv lahachil es Yisrael kochim b'chutz. That is almost as if, and therefore it shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be that we should eat on the night of Pesach a gedi mekulos, because it's almost as if kochim b'chutz. Rashi says, doimel kochim. The hemshich to this, it says in the Gemara, iboya lahu. The Gemara has an iboya. Toidus ish roimi, gavre rabahava, was he a great Talmud Chochem, an Adam Godel? Oy bal egroifim have, or was he a strong man? Rashi says, gavre rabba umipnei kvoidoi loy nidu oisoi. It was because of his great honor that they didn't put him in Cherem, because he was so chashiv. Oy bal egroifim have, umipnei hayira, maybe because they were afraid of him. They were afraid of him. L'chayre, I mean, what difference does it make? Even if he was a Gavra Rabbah, we paskin that you shouldn't eat a gdi mikulos b'leilei psachim bachutz. So what difference does it make now? Iboyalahu, having an iboya, why did they not put him in Cherem? Is it because he was such a great Talmud Chochem, or because he was so powerful? Yeah. So this is one question. The Gemara continues and says, Toshima zu dorash toidus ish roimi. This drasha, toidus ish roimi darshan. Ma ro'u Chananya, Mishoel, va'azarya, shemosru atzmon al kedushas Hashem lekivshon ha'esh. Why did they endanger their life and go into the kivshon ha'esh? When they insisted not to be mishtachave to the tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar, they were put into the kivshon ha'esh. Why did they do so? So he says, Nosu kal v'choyme ba'atzmam. They made a kal v'choyme mitzvardim, from the frogs in Mitzrayim. How? Because uma tzvardim she'ein mitzuvin al kedushas Hashem. The tzvardim are not mitzuvin al kedushas Hashem. And nevertheless, ksiv b'hu uvo olu bebeischa, etc. Uvisanu recha ubemishari secha. So they came into the ovens and into the kneading bowls. Amesai misharois mitzuyois eitzel taner. When are the kneading bowls next to the oven? Havayome b'shosha tanucha. No, so the tzvardim were actually giving up their lives and burning to death. So, and nevertheless they did so, even though they're not mitzuveh al kedushas Hashem. Onu she mitzuvin al kedushas Hashem, halachas kama v'chama. Chanani Mishol v'Azariah said, so we that are mitzuvah al kedushas Hashem, for sure we should give up our lives and go into the kivshon ha'esh. So based on this drasha, that Toidus Ishraimi Darshan, the Gemara decides that Toidus must have been a Gavra Rabbah. So it's kind of interesting. This Kal V'chomer is so impressive that it proves that Toidus was a Gavra Rabbah. Okay, so I want to suggest as follows, that, the Iker Shaila that Toidus Ishraimi asks, Ma Ro'u Chananya, Mishoel, Va'azarya, that they gave up their life and they went into the Kivshan Eish. The Rishonim ask, what's the question? I mean, we all know that Avodah Zarah is B'Yoharik Val Yaver. We learn B'chol Nafshecha. Afilu Hu Noitlas Nafshecha. So why did Chananya, Mishoel, Va'azarya need to have a Kal V'chomer from the Tzvardeim in order to risk their lives? I mean, it's a halacha, B'chol Nafshecha, Afilu Hu Noitlas Nafshecha, that it's Yoharik Val Yaver. So Tosfos says, Umefaresh Rabbeinu Tam, the Tzelem Zeh she'oso Nebuchadnezzar, this Tzelem that Nebuchadnezzar made and he expected them to bow down to, Lav Avodah Zorah have. It wasn't an Avodah Zorah. Elo Indarte. It was a monument she'oso l'chvoid atzmoi. It was a monument that was in his honor. So therefore, Toidus Ishraimi is asking, Ma Ro'u. So why did they risk their lives for this? The Chein Mashma. Tosfos says it's Azoy's Mashma in the Pasuk, because it says, Le'elohoch les anan palchim. We don't worship your God. V'letzlam didahave loy nisgoid. And we won't bow down to the Tzelem. Mashma. Zoktoises the Elohodi day, the Tzalmedi day, Trey Milinin. It's mashma that his God and his Tzelem are two different things, which makes sense according to what Tosfos is saying, that the Tzelem was just a monument in his honor, and they were saying that even that we will not do. And according to this, we can also understand that the Gemara says in Elu Nairis in Ksubis Daf Lamed Gimel, the Gemara says, Lamoli nogdu lechananya mishol va'azarya polchu letzalma, that Hanani, Vishol, Azariah were willing to go into the Kivshan Eish, but if they would have been hit over and over again, they couldn't have withstood the Nisayan, and they would have bowed down to the Tzelem. If the Tzelem was Avodah Zarah, Chas v'Sholem, that we should say about them, Shehoyu Mishtachavim Loy. So this works out well according to what we're saying, says Tosfos, says the Rabbeinu Tam, that it wasn't really an Avodah Zarah. It was just a monument in his honor. Umihu, however, says Tosfos, however, Loshen Polchu lo yosi shapi, because the Loshen of Polchu is a Loshen of worship, and it's not applicable to a monument, which is just in his honor. But that's what the Rabbeinu Tam said. And the Ri says, Ma Ro'u, the question of Ma Ro'u, Hanani, Mishol, Vazariah, is a question, why didn't they escape? So he has a different suggestion. Now, according to the Rabbeinu Tam, that this thing was just a monument and it wasn't Avodah Zarah. So darf man doch Tage verstehen. So why were they Moisei Nefesh? Not to give him honor. Why were they Moisei Nefesh? They learned from the Tzvardim. What does that have to do with Kiddush Hashem? I mean, it's about giving Nebuchadnezzar honor. Why is that something to be Moisei Nefesh for? So the Rabbeinu David over there says, also like the Rabbeinu Tam, he says, "Ve'ikar hapirush she'oisei hatzelem lo hoyo avodah zarah, elo andarti shel malachim hoyo." It was a monument in honor of the king. V'lo hoyo oisei lahavir. He wasn't forcing them to bow down in order to be ma'avir al hadas. Elo lechvoid atzmoi ulemayit b'chvoid shamayim. His intention was kvoid atzmoi and miut kvoid shamayim. V'heim diktiku b'dover v'ro'u shehoyo oisei lechvoid atzmoi ulemayit b'chvoid shamayim. Mosru atzmoi l'kiv shenaish mikal v'choyim mitzvardim shekol sheyesh bo inyin kedushas Hashem roi limsor nafshoy olav. So what exactly is the Rabbeinu David saying? It seems like he's saying that if it would be just for his own honor, it wouldn't bechlal be shaykh to the sugi of Kiddush Hashem. But they were diktaku b'davar, and they understood that it's not just about his own honor, it's also about miut kvoit shamayim. That somehow he's in competition with kvoit shamayim, and by bowing down to his monument, it would be an expression of miut kvoit shamayim. So there's an Inyan Kiddush Hashem, an Inyan Kiddush Hashem. It's not Yehorig Val Yavor, it's an Inyan Kiddush Hashem. And they learned from the Tzvardim that even an Inyan of Kiddush Hashem is something to be Moiseh Nefesh for. But you see from the Rabbeinu David that even if it's an Inyan Kiddush Hashem, Ro'ui Limser Nafshay Olav, it's not the Yemechuyev, it's Ro'ui. So what does that mean? Is it possible that something is not Mechayiv Mesiris Nefesh and nevertheless it's appropriate to be Moiseh Nefesh even though there's no Chiyuv? So the emes about this, there's a Machlokes Rishonim. The Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, the beginning of Perek Hay, says that when all mitzvahs Shabbat where the halacha is Yavor Va'al Yehorek, it's not just that you're allowed to transgress and not give up your life, but you're not allowed to give up your life because there's v'chai b'hem. V'chai b'hem is not just permission, but v'chai b'hem is a chiyuv, and therefore the Rambam says you're not allowed to give up your life unless you're mechuyev to give up your life in the Gimel Chamuris, that's Yehorig Val Yaver. But on the other hand, Tosis and Avodah Zarah Daf Chav Zayin says v'imrotza lahachmer al atzmei b'shar mitzvahs harashus b'yodoi, and Tosis brings a raya from a Yerushalmi. So according to Tosis, v'chai b'hem is just a shiur in how much one is mechuyev to give for mitzvahs, and we say that in the 610 mitzvahs, he's only mechuyev to give up to his life, but he's not mechuyev to give up his life. But if he volunteers to give up his life, Tosfos says it's okay. And maybe we can say that the Shita of the Rabbeinu Tam, that the Tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar was not an Avodah Zorah, and nevertheless they gave up their life in order not to be mishtachavet to that monument. And as the Rabbeinu David says, the Ro'ui Limsor Nafshoy Olav, even though there's no chiyuv, is following the Shita of Tosfos that even when the halacha is Yavor ve'al Yehorik, transgress and don't get killed, there's a kiyum in Yehorik ve'al Yavor. It's just important to point out that the Rabbeinu David is taking this further than the Tosfos, because in Tosfos it just says that you could be Moiseh Nefesh for any of the other mitzvos. But if this monument was just a monument in honor of the king, so it's not an Avera B'chlal to bow down to this monument. And therefore, the Inyan Kedushas Hashem that's Ro'ui Limsar Nafshoy Olav, according to the Rabbeinu David, is a much further idea than what it says in Tosfos. But in any case, this is the Rabbeinu David's interpretation in the Shitas HaRabbeinu Tam. However, other Rishonim had a different understanding in the Shitas Rabbeinu Tam. The Rashba in Ksubas Daf Lamed Gimel says, Hodam Rinon ilemoli nagdu lechananya misho va'azariya havu palchi letzalme lav dafke. This that the Gemara says that if they would have hit them, they would have worshipped the tzelem. It's not for real. Elo guzma ba'al mekomar. The Gemara is just trying to express that Yisurim are sometimes worse than death. But it's a guzma ba'al. Inami. And the first shot that he says is because he's assuming that it's an Avodah Zarah, and if it's an Avodah Zarah, Avada, they wouldn't give in even if they would be suffering Yisur. Inami, says the Rashba, or perhaps we can say, Lav Avodah Zarah have it wasn't an Avodah Zarah. Elan Darta L'chvoida Shel Nebuchadnezzar was just a monument in the honor of Nebuchadnezzar. V'afagav Diksiv. Okay, whatever. And that's why the Gemara says, why did Hanani V'Shol V'Azariah decide to give up their life? If it wasn't Avodah Zarah, it must be that it was just an andarta. They learned the Kal V'chomer from Tzvardim because this is just a matter of Kedushas Hashem. What's the matter of Kedushas Hashem? Says the Rashba, the To'i ba inshi ukavodah zara dami lahu. Because people were toya, people mistakenly thought that it's an avodah zara. Ulekadesh Hashem b'fnei am ha'oretz asukei. The reason that they gave up their life was lekadesh Hashem b'fnei the amei ha'oretz that think that it's an avodah zara. So you see that the Rashba is saying that there was an element of Kiddush Hashem here, but he explains why. There was an element of Kiddush Hashem because be'enei am ha'oretz, it seemed to be an avodah zara, and therefore there was a Kiddush Shem Shamayim by being Moiseh Nefesh for not bowing down to something that in the eyes of the Amaratzim is considered an avodah zara. Now the Rashba continues, and he says, "V'shuv matzasi b'medrash chazisa in Shir Hashirim Rabbah, sheshoalu liyecheskel v'amar lahu kach mikublani miyeshaya Rabbi." They asked him what to do. He says, "Listen, I have a Kabbalah. Chavi k'ma'at rega ad yaver zam. Hide for a moment until the zam will be over." In other words, he advised them to hide. Omrulei, they said to Yecheskel, "Ma'at boye, the Yehoin Amrin, Hadain letzalma sagdin leikol umayo." Do you want people should say that all the nations of the world bow down to avodah zara? Amar lahoinu ma'at bon. What do you, Hananya, Mishol, Vazariah want? Omrulei, the Yehoin Amrin, that people should say, "Tzalme kol umayo sagdin le lebar Yisrael." We want people should say that everyone bows down to the tzelem, but Jews do not. V'zeh ikir, and this is the ikir pshat. Sh'oyu yicholim l'stalik mishom, elo shekol atzmon l'kadosh yis Hashem hayu miskaveh. So you see, the Rashba is more nichet with the second pshat that the tzelem was really an avodah zara, and the question of ma'arohu is not a question of why did they decide to put themselves in the sakana? Why didn't they just escape? Why didn't they hide? And for that, the answer is that they learned from the Tzvardim. But it's not clear. Why is the Rashba say v'chein ikir that the second pshat is better? Why is he not happy with the pshat of the Rabbeinu Tam that it wasn't really an avodah zara? That also explained everything very well. So it would seem that it's not clear to the Rashba that there's a kiyum of Kiddush Hashem by holding back from bowing down to what's an avodah zara only according to the misconception of people. I mean, why should we care about what they're thinking? I mean, they're making a mistake if it's really not an avodah zara. And therefore, the Rashba prefers learning that it was an avodah zara. And the question is, why didn't they escape? But he doesn't want to learn like the Rabbeinu Tam that it wasn't an avodah zara. And the Kiddush Hashem dimension was because people mistakenly thought that it's an avodah zara, because he holds that what people mistakenly think that it's an avodah zara, there's no element of Kiddush Hashem in dealing with people's misconception. That would be one possibility, but I say that it's punkt verkehrt. That the Rashba in his Maskana holds that when people mistakenly consider something an avodah zara, and they think it's an avodah zara, so me'ikir adin yitzi horig val yaver, and that's why he dropped the first pshat. In other words, even if it's not an avodah zara, if people think that it's an avodah zara, there's yehorig val yaver to be mishtachaveh to this thing. Why am I saying that? Because in Masechtas Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Beis there's a brisa. Yoshav loy koitz b'fnei Avodah Zarah. A thorn got into my leg in front of an Avodah Zarah. Lo yishchavi itlena. I shouldn't bow down and pick it up. B'pnei shenira k'mishtachav al Avodah Zarah. Because it seems as if I'm being mishtachav to the Avodah Zarah. V'spazru loy ma'oisa b'fnei Avodah Zarah. My money fell down in front of the Avodah Zarah. Lo yishche. v'yitlem, I shouldn't bow down and pick it up. Mipnei shenirek mishtach v'lavi dezor. Ma'yon hamoishech, if there's a fountain, l'fnei avodah zarah, I shouldn't put my head down and drink from the ma'yon mipnei shenirek mishtach v'lavi dezor. This is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Beis, and the Gemara says clearly that Chazal asid it mipnei maris ayin, and therefore it's like anything that they asid mipnei maris ayin, that even b'chadri chadorim it's us. Now, the din of the ma'ayon, of the fountain, appears in the Torah in Yoredei, Siman Kuf Nun. The Torah says, Lo yishche v'yishte v'afilu imo yisilo shosi. Even if I'm in a situation that I'll die if I don't drink, I'm that thirsty, I'm not allowed to bow down and drink from this ma'ayon. So you see, in the Torah, Mefurish, that Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah is B'Yoharig Val Yaver. Be'emes Azoy the Pashtus of the Sugya in Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Beis. Because the Gemara makes it Srichusa over there. Why do we need the three cases? The Koitz, the Mois, and the Ma'ayon. And the Gemara says, the Itona Hani Tarti, if it would only say about the thorn and about the money, I would say Mishum Deleka Sakona. Avol Mayon, the Kisakone, the Loishosi Mayis, Emaloi. I would think in such a case he's allowed to. Tzricha. That's why we mentioned the third case. It's L'chora Mefurish Gemara that Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah is Yoharig Val Yaver. The Ran says the Efshe the B'mokim Sakone Shori V'lo Yasrina Mishum Maris Ayin. He doesn't want to go so far. V'hoda Amrinan Shelo Yishte. Afal pidi shosi mayis lav dafke mayis vaday. So the Ran somehow gets out of the Gemara and says that the Gemara doesn't mean that he's mamish going to die. And so also the Rosh and Tshuva in Klal Yutes says that the Gemara is not for real. It doesn't mean that he's actually going to die. However, the Torah says mafurish that even if he's going to die, he's mechuyev to be moisa nefesh. And azoy state in Tshuva Sarashbe, that's brought earlier in the Torah in Siman Kuf Mem Tes, Ir sheyesh ba avodah zarah, a town that has an avodah zarah, and it's the main focus of the town is the avodah zarah. Also leilach l'shom im haderech miyuchedes lo yisir bilvad. You're not allowed to go in the direction of that city if it's miyuchet to that city, because mishum chshode sheyachshedu shehoylach lavet shom avodah zarah. Okay, because of Rashbe, that the same applies to a street. And then he says, "Va'afilu al pikuach nefesh osur likonis l'shom kidamrin gabi mayon." So we see clear that the Rashba holds that Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah is Bechlal Avizrayu, the Avodah Zarah, and it's Mechayev Yoharig Va'al Yaver. So therefore, I want to say that's why the Rashba in his Maskana didn't want to learn that the Tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar was for covered Ba'alma, but people considered it to be an Avodah Zarah, and therefore they were Moise Nefesh, because according to the Rashba, if that was the case, so it would be weiter mechuyev b'yoharig val yaver. We wouldn't need a limud from the Tzvardim, because it's Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah. It's Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah, and therefore the Rashba didn't want to learn like this, and the Rashba learned that it wasn't Avodah Zarah, but the issue is, why didn't they run away? Avada, you could be mechalik. I see Yeshua, you're always making faces because he wants to be mechalik that the tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar is maybe not like the Mayon, because over there it's really an Avodah Zarah. It's just that the Hishtachava is not for real. But over here, if it's not an Avodah Zarah, who says that it's Maris Ayin? But I think that you're wrong and I'm right. I think that it shouldn't make any difference, because what's the difference if the mistake is what the object is, or the mistake is what I am doing? In both cases, it's equally true that it's Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah.
Ramesh has the tshuva. Yeah, Ramesh has the tshuva.
One second. Now you want to bring me Bekiyas. 1 second. I'm discussing this thing, first of all, as is. So I'm saying that if Maris Ayin of Avodah Zarah is Mechuyev b'Yoharig Val Yaver, by the Mayon, it will be Mechuyev by the Tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar, even if it was only covered, and that's why the Rashba doesn't like this pshat. But maybe we can say that this is not considered Marasayin of Avodah Zarah for a different reason, and that's because Reb Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva in Chelek Aleph Siman Tzadik Vav, where he says a big chiddush in Hilchas Marasayin. You know, Reb Moshe has a tshuva about somebody that's complaining that he saw him driving in a car after the Zman of Lichbench. So he says, Malas Kvoid Yedidi, etc. Nehenesi Ma'oid. I derive great pleasure. Asher Malas Kvoid Nizdares Lekayim Mitzvahs Teichecha. That you were so fast at being Mekayim, the great mitzvah of giving Musa, Lefi Daitoi, according to your opinion. I'm very thankful. Don't even think that I'm upset. I take it upon myself. Even though there's nothing wrong. Okay. And now he explains, why do I hold that there's no shemetz isur af mishum marasai? He says, Ki yeda yedidi, I want you to know, my good friend, asher isur maris ayin hu rak bedover, shenase beroiv ha'pa'amim ba'ofen ha'asur. Something that the standard way of doing this is bederech ha'asur. V'hu oise ba'ofen ha'muter, and I'm doing it in an unusual way, which is muter. That's Osru Zemishum Marasayin. Keep going. Last is al Yedei Nokri B'Kablonus, that I have a worker that's a contractor that's doing a malacha that usually is done as a day job that's being paid, where I'm being paying per day. So when somebody is working for me on Shabbos as a contractor, it's also Mishum Marasayin because he's doing the kind of work that in the standard way to do that is when he's being paid per hour. And he brings other examples. But to do something that's a hetem afursim, and this is a well-known thing, that women are mekabel Shabbos when they light the candles. Va'anoshim, but men mekablim, but they sefes kotten. Men are mekabel Shabbos a few minutes before Shabbos. Virak. So memela, it's not marasai. It's not marasai. Everybody understands that this is not something that's us. Now he adds another shtickle. Virak efshe, but it's still possible. Yesh eize noshim toyos. Could be that there are women that make a mistake in halacha, that they think that the zman hadlokas neiris actually creates an iser malacha for men. So he says, Lo shayach lesser bazeh mishum marasai. This is also not a reason to aser mishum marasai. We're not against them finding out the truth. In other words, he says that when somebody's making a legal mistake, it's b'chlal not shak to the sugi of Marasayin. Let him find out the truth. Adirabba, maybe I'm helping him get to find out the truth. In other words, so if women think that it's also to do malacha, that men are also to do malacha from the time of Atlokas Neiris, I mean, that's not a Marasayin b'chlal because they should find out the truth. So in other words, there are two issues over here. One is that people will think that the one that's traveling in the car was already Mekabel Shabbos. So he says there's no reason that they should think that. And then there's another issue. Maybe there are people that are going to think that al pi halacha, after the woman was madlik neiris, there's a issa malacha for the man. So he says that a legal mistake is b'chlal not a marasayin issue. So now I want to say that we have to be mesupik. When the Rashba says, the havu to'i ba inshi, that in spite of the fact that this was just a monument in honor of Nebuchadnezzar, people mistakenly considered it an avodah zarah. What's the pshat? That they made a legal mistake? They thought that a monument in honor of the king has a din of avodah zarah? Or did they make a practical mistake that they thought that this was a real avodah zarah, right? So if we're going to say that they made a legal mistake, we can't say that it's Marasayin because Rav Moshe says that that's not Marasayin b'chlal. So we won't be able to say that the reason that the Rashba doesn't want to learn this pshat is because he holds that you're mechuyev to be moise nefesh, and you don't need a limit from the tzvardim because you're really not mechuyev to be moise nefesh. But if we say that the toy in shiu kavod zara damalo means that they made a practical mistake, so then we could say, as I said, that the reason that the Rashba doesn't want to learn this is because he holds that maris ayin the avodah zara is mechuyev mesiris nefesh, and memela they wouldn't need the limit from the tzvardim. But you know, if you carefully read the Rashba, he says, "Ulekadish es Hashem b'fnei amei ha'oretz asukein." He says that amei ha'oretz were toya. What does that have to do with Amaratzes? I mean, somebody doesn't know the real meaning of this monument. If it was made for Avodah Zarah, if it was made for the honor of the B'chadetz, it doesn't make him an Amoritz. Obviously, if he uses the language Am Ha'oretz, it's mashma that we're talking about a legal mistake, that they think that a monument like this takes on a din of Avodah Zarah, a din of Avodah Zarah. And Lefizeh, we're going to have to say not like Reb Moshe. In other words, that even a Torah's bedin is marasayin, and that's why the Rashba decided to go against the Rabbeinu's Tam's pshat, that it was a Torah's avodah zarah, because according to the Rashba, in such a case, midina there's Yehorik Val Yaver, and why do they need a kal v'chomer from the Tzvardim? However, in the Das Rabbeinu Tam himself, we can say that he holds like Reb Moshe, that there's no maris ayin midina in such a case. Because when people are making a legal mistake, it's not marasayin. It's their problem. Let them find out. And therefore, the Rabbeinu Tam says that Medina, there was no din of Yehorik Val Yaver. And that's why they needed to learn from the Tzvardim. Okay, so now, according to this, it comes out that what? That according to the Rabbeinu Tam, that the Nidin of Chananya, Mishol, V'Azariah was about avoiding maris ayin of ishtachavot avodah zarah, and this was the kal v'chomer that they made from the tzvardim, that it's appropriate to be moise nefesh for the kiyum of kiddush Hashem, even though Medina there's no Yehorik Val Yaver. So we could understand how we figured out from Toidus Ish Roimi's drosha that he was a gavre rabba and he wasn't a balai groifin. Why? Because he was manig as b'nei Roimi lechol gedoyim mikulasin b'leilei psach. And the Chachamim said about this that he's koroiv lahachil as Yisrael kochim bachutz. As Rashi says, it's doime lekochim. So the chayre, this is an issue of marisai. But even that the iboye, if he's a gavre rabba or a balai groifin, was that we're not sure why did they not put him in chayrim, because he's a gavre rabba and there's room for his shita. That in such a case, there's no din marisai. Or it's pashut that in such a case there is marasayin, but he was a balai groif and he didn't care about marasayin. Now that we find out that Toidus Ish Roimi darshan that Chanani Mishol V'Azariah learned to be moise nefesh from the tzvardim, so they learned to be moise nefesh on the kiyum of kiddush Hashem that was in their holding back from being mishtachavet to what people considered to be an avodah zarah, which is marasayin of avodah zarah. So we see that Toidus Ish Roimi holds of the issue of Marasai. So Al Korchach, when he was Machil Kochim Bachutz, when he was manhig the Bnei Roimi to eat Gedoyim and Kulosim, it's not because he didn't care about Marasai. He himself made a drasha about Marasai. It must be that he held that in this case there is no Marasai. And Mamela, there's room for his shita, even if we don't paskin like him. And Mamela, he's a Gavre Rabbi. In other words, if he would be somebody that doesn't believe in the issue of Marasai, he would be a upgefrekte mensch. I mean, he wouldn't be a gavre rabbi. He would be he would be off the charts. But since we see that he was choishish for Marasayim because he dashed in the drush of Chanani Mishol V'Azariah, or he was a gavre rabbi and he wasn't a balai groif. Now I want to add like this: the Torah by the Tzvardeya uses a singular loshen, a loshen yochid. It says Vatal haTzvardeya Vatachas es ein haaretz. The Tzvardeya, Loshen Yochid, the Tzvardeya, the frog, covered Mitzrayim. So there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin of Samach Zayin that says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Tzvardeya achas hoisa. It was just one Tzvardeya, umilo es kol eretz Mitzrayim. It filled the entire Mitzrayim. Amalei Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah said to Rabbi Akiva, Malacha Yitzel Hagoda. What are you getting busy with dashing drushes of Hagoda? Kalei mizberoisecha. Stop talking. V'leich eitzel negoim v'olis. Negoim v'olis, that's your forte. I mean, don't try to say drush. Yeah, that's what he said to Rabbi Akiva. And he says, you want to know why it says Loshin Yochid? Tzvardeya achas hoisa. It really started with one tzvardeya. Shorkol lahem. It's, no, how do you say shorkol lahem? It whistled. I mean, but it doesn't mean whistling over here. It made the sound that it's tzvardeya makes. I'm sure there's a special word for that. Vehem bo. So they all gathered. That's Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah's pshat in Vatalat tzvardeya. So Lamaisa, it's not clear. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, why is he getting so angry? And he's saying, I mean, what are you dashing drushes? I mean, go learn to go involve this. I mean, it's such a terrible thing. I mean, and if Rabbi Akiva once in a while will dash in a drusha, he's going to stop learning to go involve this. Most probably, he'll still be learning to go involve this. Once in a while, he'll say a drusha. I mean, what's such a terrible thing? So I want to suggest as follows. The Gemara in Brachas Daf Samachala from Bey says, Tonu Rabbanan Pam Achas Gozra Malchus Harisho'o. Yeah, the Romans were going to say that Eden should not learn. But Popus ben Yehuda, umitzoil Rabbi Akiva, shehoyomakil kihilois berabim v'oisim b'torah. So the Rabbi Akiva is sitting and learning. Makil kihilois berabim. He's being marbitz Torah. Amalei Akiva, iato misyare mipnei malchus harisho. Are you not afraid? How do you dare? I mean, be makil kihilois berabim and be marbitz Torah in such a time. So the Maharsha and the Chidushei Agadis over there, Istaka says, what's the pshat Rabbi Akiva that he endangered his life? Talmud Torah is one of the 610 mitzvahs that are Yavor V'al Yehorig. I mean, there's no din of Yehorig V'al Yavor. You know, today the list of Yehorig V'al Yavor became so tight that even Avodah Zarah Eretz Shechazim fell out because everything you hear about is Yehorig V'al Yavor. But in those times, they only had three things. And so Mamela, he asked him, how you talking? That you're being Moise Nefesh for this? So the Maharsha says, Ulafi divrei ha'toisves shekosvu b'perek ein ma'amidin. Al pi divrei ha'Yerushalmi, shimrotza adam lahachmir al atzmai afilu b'shar mitzvahs shari, that a person is allowed to be machmir even b'shar mitzvahs. Ikalameimer, Rabbi Akiva nami, machmir al atzmai hoyo. Okay? That's what the Maharsha says. Now, we already said that the Makor for being Machmer al Atzmai, B'chore, is from the Ma'is of Hanani Mishal V'Azariah, according to the Rabbeinu Tam, that the Tzelem wasn't really an Avodah Zorah, and it wasn't in the Yehorig V'al Yavor, and nevertheless they were Moise Nefesh. Okay, now, Hanani Mishal V'Azariah, where did they come from? They learned from the Tzvardim, that even though they weren't Nitztaveh, they were Moise Nefesh. As they say, Nosu Kal V'choymer, mit Ba'atzma Me'atzvardim. Now, in the Sfas Emes, Al Asar, in Psochim, when he says, what do you mean they're not mitzvah al Kiddush Hashem? Very nice, they're not mitzvah al Kiddush Hashem. But there was a mitzvah mefurish, uvo alecha bebeischa, ubetanurecha, ubemisharisecha. So they were mechoyev. They weren't mechoyev al Kiddush Hashem, but they were mechoyev to do what they were told, and they were told to get into the ovens. So what is there? How are we learning a kal v'chomer from the tzvardim that were not mitzvah? They were mitzvah. So I want to suggest that it says in the pasuk for olu uvo bebeischa ubechadar mishkovcha va'al mitoscha ubebeis avodecha uve'amnecha uve'sanurecha ube'misharisecha. So it wasn't that all the tzvardim, not every single frog had to get into the ovens. Mamela, every individual frog could have drained the charois from dying by choosing to be Mekayim the Makkah in the beds, to be Mekayim the Makkah in the Chadar Mishkovcha and the Bebeischa, right? And it's Efshel Asali De'acherim. I mean, why does this frog have to go into the oven? So with Taka saying that those that went into the oven, they weren't mitzvah. Yeah, it's only because of the kiyum of Kiddush Hashem they went into the oven. Because they weren't mitzvah, they could have gone somewhere else. They went to be Mekayim the Kiddush Hashem. But all this we can only say, according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, that there were many tzvardim. And Memela, each individual tzvardeya wasn't mitzvah to get into the oven. But if you say like Rabbi Akiva that there was one tzvardeya, so it was mitzvah. Even according to Rabbi Akiva, l'chara, we have to learn, like Rashi says, that it says later tzvardeim, And Rashi says, Svardea achas hoisa v'hoyu makin hoisa v'hoisa matezes nechilim nechilim. But since, according to Rabbi Akiva, it started with one Svardea, so the chiyuv on all the Tzvardim that came out was to go into the ovens. Nobody could say, I'm not the one, because they were all the one, right? So Mamela, according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm saying that Tzvardim were mitzvah to go into the ovens. And Mamela comes out, according to Rabbi Akiva, the kasha of the Sfas Emes comes back, that they were mitzvah, and there's no kal v'chaymer. And that's why Rabbi Elazar ben Azari was choishish, that now that Rabbi Akiva got involved in saying Divrei Agoda, and he said this idea that it was one Tzvardeya, so we're going to lose the kal v'chaymer from the Tzvardim. And Mamela, we're not going to have a source that it's appropriate to be Moiseh Nefesh and Kiddush Hashem even when there's no chiyuv. And therefore, he's going to stop teaching the Goan V'olis. He's not going to be Makol Kilos Barabim, because the whole Makol Kilos Barabim and being Marbitz Torah is like the Maharsha says, because you're allowed to be Machmir. You're allowed to be Machmir and be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim even when not Mitzvah. And that only comes from the Tzvardim. But if there was one Tzvardeya, then there's no Mocker anymore. Well, the Fizah Dafen Be'emes Fashtein, what was the Pshat in Rabbi Akiva? Why was he Makol Kilos Barabim B'Shas Sakona? According to him, there's taka no source. According to him, that there was one Tzvardeya, there's no source. So the emes, you have to say that, like the Maharsha says in the second teretz, that the Gzeira, Shaloi Lasik B'Torah, made it into a Shas Shmad, and B'Shas Shmad Medina, there's a Chi of Mesiras Nefesh, even on Arkis Seder Mesani. Now, if you look at the Gemara says, B'Shosho Itziu Es Rabbi Akiva Laharigo, that when they were taking out Rabbi Akiva to kill him, Zman Kriya Shma'oi, he was circling as Besoroi B'Masreikois Shel Barzel, V'hoya Mekabel all of Oil Malchus Shomai. Rashi says he was Koyer Kriya Shma. Omru Loi Talmid of Rabbeinu, Ad Kan. Amalohem kol yomai hoyisi mitztair al pasuk zeh b'chol nafshecha afilu hu noiteles nafshecha. Amarti mosa yovoi liyodi v'akaimenu v'achshov shebo liyodi lo yakaimenu hoyamarich be'echad at sheyotze nishmas. Now, since Rabbi Akiva is bringing the pasuk of b'chol nafshecha, v'ais techois that he holds that Medina there's a chiyuv of Yehorig Val Yavar over here, and the Maharsha already points that out. Because I mean, B'chol Nafshecha is from where we learn that that is a Chi of Mesiras Nefesh on the Gimel Chamuris. But often that I want to suggest that his Talmidim that asked Ad Kan, they held that he's doing this only als a machmir al atzmoi, like the other teretz of the Maharsha, and he said to them that no, it's B'chol Nafshecha because it's a Shas Hashmad. And the Fiza, I want to explain the lashon of Ad Kan. Because if you look in Perek Shira, the Shira of the Tzvardim is Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Elolam Vod. So now, Rabbi Akiva was Marich Be'echad. His Talmidim said to him, Rabbeinu Ad Kan, they were surprised that he doesn't continue to say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Elolam Vod, which is the Shira of the Tzvardim, because they held that he's doing what he's doing, Mishum Late, the Kiyum Kiddush Hashem, even where there's no Chiyuv, and that's learned from the Tzvardim. So it would be appropriate that he should sign off his life with Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay Lo'olam Vod, which is the Shira of the Tzvardim. So why are you stopping Ad Kan? But he said to them, no. Kol Yomei Hayisim Mitzvah Pasuk. I hold that this is a Chiyuv Meikir Adin, and therefore Yotza Nishmasei Be'echad, and he didn't continue to Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay Lo'olam Vod. Okay, Ad Kan. So Rabbi say, yeah, it's a little hard to say such kind of things on the Zoom. I mean, but you know what? Since it connected to the Daf Yomi and the Parsha, I figured it's a simon min hashamayim that we should push ourselves and do even something like that.